It was nearly closing time on a Friday night when Joey realized he had lost track of his little brother Timmy somewhere in the cavernous Costco warehouse. As a store employee started announcing the final call for customers over the loudspeaker, Joey felt his stomach drop. Where could Timmy have wandered off to? The two brothers had planned to pick up some snacks and then head home to watch movies together. But now, Joey was alone among the towering shelves and pallet racks, unsure where Timmy might be hiding. As Joey rushed down the main aisle, the bright fluorescent lights suddenly switched off row by row. He could hear the large metal doors at the store entrance grinding shut and the clicks of locks sliding into place. It seemed the employees had not noticed him still inside and were closing up for the night, unaware that 8-year-old Timmy was also somewhere in the darkened warehouse. Joey felt his heartbeat quicken. He was not normally scared of the dark, but being trapped inside such an enormous warehouse, alone except perhaps for his little brother, was deeply unsettling. The pitch blackness around him was disorienting. He took out his cell phone to use as a flashlight, but of course there was no reception this deep inside the concrete walls. "Timmy!" Joey shouted, his voice echoing eerily through the cavernous space. No answer. Where could he be? Timmy loved to hide, but surely he would have come out by now. As Joey's eyes slowly adjusted to the dark, he tried to remember the Costco layout from their occasional family trips. Produced near the entrance where they came in. Then household goods, clothing, electronics. The center aisles would have toys and sporting goods, he seemed to remember. Timmy had always loved wandering through that section, playing with model cars and bouncing basketballs when they lingered too long. Joey headed in what he hoped was the right direction, flashing his phone light intermittently to spot the hanging aisle signs. Dairy, deli, frozen foods. He felt like he was getting close, but an unnatural silence hung over the deserted warehouse. His shoes squeaked loudly on the polished concrete floors, the only sound besides his own tense breathing. "Timmy, where are you? This isn't funny anymore," Joey shouted into the dark. He strained to hear any hint of his little brother. A giggle, a rustle, soft footsteps. But nothing stirred in the cavernous shadows. As Joey crept deeper into the eerie darkness, his imagination conjured strange shapes in his flickering phone light. Mannequins without heads, stacks of chairs like hulking beasts, giant promotional cardboard cutouts with lifeless eyes that seemed to follow him as he passed. He tried to shake off the creepy feeling, reminding himself that the warehouse was completely empty except for himself and hopefully Timmy. Finally, Joey recognized the aisle filled with bicycles and shiny metal scooters, some still slowly rocking on their stands as if touched by an invisible hand. Just past this section should be the toys, he remembered. "Timmy! Come on, kiddo, I'm getting really worried about you." Joey's voice echoed unanswered through the dark warehouse. Where could his brother be? Pent-up fear was slowly turning into anger. He just wanted to find Timmy so they could figure out how to get out of this place. As Joey stepped around a towering rack of basketballs, his phone-a-light glinted off something small and bright red on the floor. Timmy's favorite Costco baseball cap. Joey rushed over and picked up the cap, heart pounding. It wasn't like Timmy to just leave this behind. Something was wrong. "Timmy, are you here?" Joey shouted desperately, whipping his phone light wildly across the shadowy stockroom. Suddenly, he froze. There, behind a pallet stacked high with colorful board games, Joey spotted a small black sneaker just visible poking out. "Timmy!" Joey cried in relief, rushing over. But as his light revealed the scene hidden behind the stacks, Joey stumbled backwards with a cry. It wasn't Timmy crouched behind the boxes at all. As the horrifying thing turned towards Joey, his legs went weak and the phone slipped from his shaking hands, clattering to the concrete floor. He opened his mouth to scream as the void swallowed him whole. It was nearly midnight on a Tuesday when Mary pulled into the empty parking lot of the 24-hour Costco. As a busy single mom, these late-night grocery runs were the only time she could shop in peace. The megastore was usually quiet this time of night, especially on a weeknight. Only a few tired employees and random insomniac shoppers wandered the aisles. As Mary parked under one of the tall LED lamps, she noticed a dark minivan idling nearby with its lights off. For a moment, she thought she saw the silhouette of a person sitting inside, but then the vehicle pulled away toward the corner of the massive parking lot. Mary shrugged it off and went inside to grab the weekly essentials: milk, eggs, bread, and microwave meals that her 2 kids would actually eat. 20 minutes later, arms laden with bulging grocery bags, Mary pushed out the exit doors, feeling satisfied. It was nice to shop without rushing for once, instead of chasing after 2 impatient kids begging for toys or candy in every aisle. The kids were spending the night at their aunt's house, so Mary was in no rush to get home. As she walked toward her car, Mary dug in her purse for her keys. She didn't notice the dark shape creeping up behind her until a hand clamped over her mouth. Heart exploding in shock and terror, Mary's bags crashed to the ground as she was dragged, struggling and muffled, toward the side of the building. Mary thrashed violently, stomping her heel down hard on her attacker's foot. With a pained yelp, he released her, and Mary didn't hesitate. She immediately sprinted away into the dark parking lot. Heavy footsteps pounded after her. Mary ran for her life, gasping, her pulse roaring in her ears. Up ahead loomed Costco's tall gray walls and glowing sign. If she could just make it back inside the store, surely she would find safety in a public place. Mary glanced back over her shoulder and let out a choked scream. The man was still following, his face obscured by a black mask. Fighting panic, Mary spotted a car pulling out of a parking space ahead. Waving her arms desperately, she ran in front of the vehicle just as it was about to drive off. Shocked by the sudden obstacle, the driver slammed on the brakes. Taking her chance, Mary yanked open the passenger door and dove inside head-first across the front seat. "Drive," she gasped. "Someone is chasing me." Heart pounding, Mary looked back and saw the masked man stop in his tracks, staring after the car from the empty parking space. Still shaken, Mary explained what happened to the bewildered driver, who turned them around to head for the Costco entrance. She would be safe now with other shoppers, or so she hoped. The automatic doors glided open and light spilled into the parking lot from the Costco interior. As Mary stepped out onto the polished concrete floor, confusion prickled through the fading adrenaline. She realized the cavernous warehouse was completely silent and still. Row after row of shelves and pallet racks stood dark and empty beneath the muted lighting. It seemed while Mary was outside, all customers and staff had disappeared. Escalators and registers were motionless in the shadows. Mary stood alone by the entrance, straining her ears in the unnatural silence. Where was everyone? The 24-hour store should still be open. "Hello?" Her tentative voice echoed through the vast store. "Is anyone here?" No reply came. The silence pressed down like a suffocating weight. Mary shuddered, sudden comprehension dawning as her wide eyes scanned the long, sweeping aisles stacked high with bulk goods. She wasn't alone here. The masked man was somewhere inside, his heavy footsteps stalking her through the cavernous shadows. Heart pounding violently, Mary stepped forward into the void. She had to find a place to hide, or somehow make it back outside to safety. Keeping her head low, Mary crept along in the eerie darkness, passing hulking racks packed with large shapes, cardboard boxes, shrink-wrap pallets, looming forklifts with sharp metal prongs. It reminded her of a terrifying funhouse full of monstrous things ready to jump out at any moment. A loud crash echoed from a few aisles over, making Mary jump. She broke into a panicked run, her own skidding footsteps loud against the polished concrete. Up ahead, at the front of the warehouse, the high windows along the entrance walls glowed in moonlight. If Mary could just make it back to those doors somehow, she paused behind a long shelf to catch her breath and scan the surroundings. No sign of the stalking man, though she sensed his nearby presence. As Mary crouched in the shadows, struggling to control her ragged breathing, her hand brushed something round and metal on the floor. She picked it up with trembling fingers, a heavy serrated meat mallet from the butcher's tools. It wasn't much against a larger attacker, but holding the solid steel mallet made Mary feel a tiny bit less defenseless. Gripping her unlikely weapon, Mary steeled herself and continued creeping silently toward the exit doors, glowing like a beacon ahead. But when she arrived, hope evaporated. The doors were locked tight. Desperate, Mary swung the meat mallet at the tempered glass doors. The steel hammer bounced off the surface with a loud bang. Mary swung harder, again and again, panic rising as the glass refused to break. Exhausted and terrified, Mary let the mallet slip from her fingers and clang to the floor. She stood panting for breath, staring hopelessly up at the full moon shining through unbroken glass. Then she heard it, from directly behind her. The soft click of a hammer being cocked. Mary reacted on pure instinct. She dropped bonelessly to the hard floor just as an ear-shattering bang split the air. "Hurry up, Emma," Mrs. Taylor called as her 6-year-old daughter lagged behind, captivated by a demonstration of a shiny new blender. Emma had been filled to the brim with restless energy all morning, driving her mother crazy with her constant fidgeting, chatter, and requests for snacks from the trove of free samples on offer. Now, Mrs. Taylor was eager to conclude their quick Costco run for supplies before Emma's patience fully ran out. Emma skipped to catch up, her bright pink sneakers squeaking on the polished concrete floors. As they headed down the freezer aisle, a blast of cold air hit them. Emma eyed the frosted glass doors lining the long hallway. Her curiosity piqued. "Brrr, it looks like a winter wonderland in there," Emma exclaimed, fogging up the glass with her breath. "The Costco North Pole." Mrs. Taylor smiled wearily, shifting the heavy items in her cart. Emma's energy could be as much a curse as a blessing when all her mother wanted was to grab what they needed and leave. Yes, all foods that need to stay cold live behind those magical doors, but don't go wandering off now. Before she could finish, Emma had zipped over to peer through the small rectangular windows of the nearest freezer. She loved all things make-believe. In her mind, she imagined the Costco freezer bursting with fantastical, icy creatures guarding the frozen aisles. If only she could take a tiny peek inside. Surely just a quick look wouldn't cause any harm. Before her mother noticed, Emma grasped the large silver handle and pulled hard. A powerful blast of frigid air rushed over Emma's small body as the heavy door swung open. Rows of frosty metal shelves towered above, stacked high with boxes and bags of frozen foods. Icicles hung from the ceiling, chandeliers in a frozen palace. Emma's eyes widened with wonder. It was like stepping into an enchanted, glittering cave. She glanced back, but could no longer see her mother outside through the thick, icy glass and swirling mist. Taking a hesitant step inside, Emma marveled at this magical world that seemed made just for her. As Emma wandered further, gazing around in awe, her sneakers slipped on the slick floor. She steadied herself against a towering wall of frozen stuffed crust pizzas. Behind her, the heavy door slowly swung shut with a muffled thud. Emma froze in sudden fear. She hadn't meant to actually come inside. Panicked, she rushed back, but the door handle wouldn't budge. The metal latch had locked automatically. "Help, let me out!" Emma yelled, pounding the glass with her small fists. But between the dense ice coating and the constant drone of coolers, her cries were lost in the void. Meanwhile, Emma became aware of a bone-chilling cold seeping through her thin jacket as icy air enveloped her. Emma hugged herself tightly, shivering. She peered desperately out the window for any sign of her mother. But the long aisle remained still and silent. Would anyone find her before what? Confused thoughts swirled through Emma's young mind. She only knew stories of long snowy sleeps, and not all of them happy tales. As dark fears crowded close, Emma shook her head stubbornly. "I must keep brave like a princess warrior," she declared to the Ice Queen staring back from the glass pane. Emma tried jumping up to reach the high frosted window and call for help, but the frozen packages lining the shelves were too slippery to climb. Minutes crawled by as Emma huddled with arms wrapped tightly around her knees. Violent shivers racked her small body. Frost flowers crept slowly across the glass above her. Even the spirit of winter was turning cruel. Eyes stinging with frightened tears, Emma shouted desperately into the endless white void. "Mommy, where are you? Please find me." Emma wasn't sure how much time had passed in the icy cave, which seemed to grow colder and darker by the minute. Curled stiffly on the floor amid the frozen foods, Emma blinked slowly as an irresistible heaviness seeped through her body. Perhaps if she just closed her eyes for a bit to rest. Fighting the sinking urge, Emma suddenly heard a faint rhythmic thudding. She raised her head with effort. Someone was pounding loudly on the glass window far above. Hope rising like a small flame inside, Emma tried to call out, but her voice was lost to the air now, as numbness crept into her throat. Shouting voices echoed from beyond the glass, barely penetrating the icy veil. With a last heroic effort, Emma dragged herself across the slick floor on weakened limbs, each movement monumental now against the cold's crushing grip. Reaching a metal shelf, she tipped boxes of burritos to the ground with the last of her strength. They crashed in an avalanche at her mother's feet, visible through the window. Kneeling down to Emma's level outside, tears freezing on her cheeks, Mrs. Taylor kept calling encouragement to her daughter. Suddenly the heavy door flew open, torn off its frozen hinges by two store workers. Emma's mother rushed in to scoop up her half-conscious child, wrapping her desperately in warm coats. As warmth slowly returned to Emma's stiff body, she basked in her mother's arms, the only place that could thaw her frozen heart back to life. It was a busy Saturday morning at the Costco in Queens, New York. Shoppers bustled up and down the wide aisles, their carts overflowing with bulk-sized goods. Near the produce section, Lucy was inspecting heads of lettuce for tonight's dinner salad. As a single woman living alone, she preferred shopping at Costco to save money despite the crowds. Lucy hummed quietly to herself as she neatly arranged some carrots and cucumbers into her cart. At 32 years old, she finally felt like all aspects of her American life were coming together. A marketing job she loved, a cozy apartment on Roosevelt Avenue, and a newfound confidence from 2 years of Krav Maga training. As Lucy strolled over to pick out some salad dressing, she noticed a man watching her curiously from the other end of the condiments aisle. He seemed to be alone and looked vaguely familiar. Probably just another customer from the neighborhood, Lucy assumed. Glancing away indifferently, she failed to notice the man continuing to watch her with unsettling focus, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. 20 minutes later, Lucy headed toward the front registers with her loaded cart. She paused to let a group of rowdy kids rush past, shouting and chasing each other around a display of giant teddy bears by the exit doors. Lucy shook her head, chuckling. She didn't envy the parents trying to wrangle them. Just then she sensed a figure come up quickly behind her. Lucy barely had time to start turning around before powerful hands shoved her to the hard floor. Cold dread flooded her body. This was no casual bump or accident. She had instantly recognized the man's towering frame from the condiments aisle earlier. Now here he was, brazenly attacking her for no apparent reason in the middle of a crowded store. Ignoring startled cries around them, the man pinned Lucy down forcefully. Shock paralyzed her for a critical few seconds before adrenaline flooded her senses. Lucy fiercely bucked her body while clawing at her attacker's face. "Get off me!" she screamed. The man was alarmingly strong, but she managed to land some good kicks to his stomach from her Krav Maga training. They crashed into her shopping cart, sending fruit and packages skidding across the polished floor. Shouting hysterically now, Lucy struggled for leverage to free herself. With a rush of terror, she felt the man's hands close around her throat, his dark eyes wild. Lucy's own choking cries echoed in her ears. She scratched desperately at his face again, while her vision darkened dangerously. In a last-ditch effort, Lucy jammed her thumbs into the man's eye sockets as hard as she could. He howled in pain, reflexively letting go of her throat. Lucy gasped for breath, coughing violently. Adrenaline coursed through her body as she scrambled to stand on trembling legs. All around, chaos erupted as frightened shoppers rushed to intervene or flee the shocking attack. Lucy kept her guard up, anticipating the man's next move. She thought she had damaged his eyes enough in self-defense to escape now, thanks to her training. But to her horror, the man stood and pulled out a large hunting knife from his jacket, grinning menacingly. "No more running. Time to finish this," he growled. Before Lucy could react, he slashed towards her face with the 8-inch blade. She leapt backwards, feeling it glance off her cheekbone, as warm blood began dripping down her neck. They stood facing each other, breaths ragged, oblivious to the pandemonium around them. Lucy clutched her stinging cheek, heart pounding wildly. She spotted her chance when the man paused to lick the blood off his knife with a sadistic smile. Lucy turned and sprinted away, ducking around a corner into an empty aisle. She desperately scanned the shelves lining the long stretch and grabbed the first potential weapon she saw, an aluminum baseball bat from the sporting goods section. Gripping the metal bat, she positioned herself behind stacks of large pet food bags near the end of the aisle. It wasn't long before Lucy saw the stalking man come around the far corner, moving slowly with the bloody knife extended. She held perfectly still, waiting for her moment despite trembling muscles. As he crossed her hiding place, Lucy burst out swinging the bat with all her strength. The metal thwacked sickeningly against bone. Howling, the man crashed to the floor, clutching his shattered knee. Lucy raised the bat again, hands slick with sweat. She had to end this now, or he would just follow her forever. As the man crawled towards his dropped knife, Lucy brought the full force of the bat down repeatedly onto his spine and ribs with desperate cries. Not until his body stilled completely did she finally stagger backwards, nausea and shock crashing over her. Around the corner came the sounds of security guards responding at last. Lucy dropped the gore-splattered bat with a clang. She stood wavering but victorious as justice arrived to carry the man's limp body away. Her peaceful life had shattered instantly, but Lucy had emerged bloodied yet unbroken. It was 10 p.m. on a Friday when Janelle arrived at the Costco to start her nightly cleaning shift. As she parked her car in the nearly empty lot, Janelle gazed up at the giant warehouse store, dominated by its ubiquitous block letters. She didn't mind working nights despite what her friends said about the creepy after-hours vibe. The solitude and quiet actually appealed to her after dealing with hordes of customers by day. Letting herself in through the locked side entrance, Janelle snapped on the harsh fluorescent lights row by row. She preferred to start cleaning the front areas first while the registers and floors were still empty. Working methodically from front to back with her cart full of supplies, Janelle found the routine almost soothing. Tonight felt different somehow right from the start. As Janelle slowly maneuvered her cart down the wide central aisle, she couldn't shake the uneasy feeling of being watched. She wrote it off to working alone late at night in a massive store. But when she entered the clothing section, the hairs on Janelle's neck prickled unexpectedly. Whipping her head around, Janelle peered down the long, shadowy aisles, lined with stacks of cardboard boxes and merchandise. Nothing looked out of place, yet an unnatural chill hung in the air. Janelle scolded herself for being silly and carried on working. But the nagging sensation persisted, like a presence lurking just out of sight. Later, while scrubbing the bathrooms by the food court, Janelle thought she heard faint crying. Pausing abruptly, she strained to listen, but only the background hum of refrigerators filled the empty hallway. Janelle hesitated, skin prickling with unease once more. Perhaps a sink was dripping somewhere, creating the odd sound in the cavernous warehouse. Heading to the warehouse storage area and back, Janelle felt the temperature drop noticeably. Icy tendrils of air grazed the back of her neck. Terror suddenly gripped her, that paralyzing sense of someone invisible looming just behind. Gasping aloud, Janelle spun quickly, nearly losing grip of her mop. No one was there, yet she couldn't escape the mounting panic for her safety. Janelle fled toward the front of the store, almost running now. But halfway down the central aisle lined with towering, shadowy shelves, Janelle skidded to a halt with a scream. There at the far end stood a shadowy figure staring directly at her, glowing eyes unblinking. Janelle stood paralyzed by the nightmarish apparition. As it slowly raised one long arm to point at her, Janelle's eyes rolled back, and she sank to the cold floor in a dead faint. Janelle awoke moments later, head spinning and cheeks wet with frightened tears. Had it just been an incredibly vivid nightmare? But no, someone was in the building with her. Determined to confront the trespasser, Janelle crept cautiously toward the central aisle once more, grabbing a broom handle for defense. "I know you're here," she shouted, voice cracking with fear. "Leave now before I call the police." A bone-chilling laugh echoed all around. Janelle spun in circles searching for the source, then a hollow voice rasped from everywhere and nowhere. "Foolish girl, I cannot leave, for this place is bound to me even in death." Janelle staggered back against the membership desk, breaths coming in panicked gasps as she grasped the haunting words. The broom handle slipped from her trembling fingers, useless against the supernatural. As Janelle stood riveted in terror, she noticed black ooze seeping from under the locked manager's office door nearby. It crept steadily across the tiles, filling the air with the stench of decay. When the foul liquid nearly reached Janelle's shoes, the office door suddenly blew open with a crash. A ghostly figure hovered in the doorway, trailing wisps of black mist. Janelle could make out a face now beneath the shadowy hood, an employee who had died years ago on site. His eyes were clouded with madness and undying rage. The ghostly figure raised its arms high with an awful shrieking sound that shook the glass doors. Lights exploded down every row, raining glass and sparks over Janelle's frozen form. As she stood paralyzed against the onslaught, a booming voice echoed around her like thunder. "The living do not belong here. Now join me for eternity, or face my vengeance." With those final icy words still ringing in her ears, Janelle felt her knees buckle as reality faded away. She surrendered limply to the dark visions flooding her mind, twisted nightmares she would be forced to relive for countless years, chained to this haunted place with its ghostly warden,